Hi there. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can convert this raw JSON data into a grid listing on your WordPress website. It's going to be done with the help of Elementor and JetEngine. And the good part is that this data is not going to be stored on your WordPress website at all. The data you see in the grid listing is going to be remotely fetched from the JSON with the help of API, and you can customize the look and the view of the grid listing the way you want. There is no limit to that. So let's get started and let me show you how you can do that. Now before starting, I'm going to show you the preview content and the JSON content from which I'm going to be building grid. So you can see here that this is a JSON content URL, and this JSON content is having a list of, let's say, books, names, the authors, and everything which is related to Game of Thrones TV show. So what happens is that it is all in this sort of raw format, and our goal is to convert this data, not store it on our website, but make a grid out of it, and it should be done all remotely. Now, whenever you visit any sort of JSON content, it always shows you the content in this sort of really messy way. But I think there's a cool trick. Whenever you click on this pretty print, it shows you content in a very straight and properly organized way. So for example, now you can read the content as well. Like before, you couldn't read it, now you can read it. So let's say the first URL is this one, then the name of the book, the ISBN, authors, and then there is the number of pages, publisher, country, media type, and everything, and then there is the name of the character. So I think in our scenario, what we are going to do is we are going to focus on the name, ISBN, maybe number of pages, publishers, country, because the number of characters it's a huge long list, so we are going to ignore this. And this is actually a basic. I'm using just I've taken this URL from the internet to give you let's say, use it for a demonstration or as an example. In your scenario, you will be actually working with JSON content that is derived from either a business application or anything, but I think that's a different discussion. Now let's get started. Now before getting started, you want to make sure that you have installed JetEngine, because JetEngine is the core feature, or let's say the core plugin that's required for this whole setup to work. Now what you have to do is you have to click on JetEngine. Once you do that, from here you will need to enable this REST API listings. So with this, once it's enabled, we can be able to add our own API content from this URL. So what we are going to do is we are going to click on save. That's done. I'm going to click on JetEngine again, and then you can see here that the REST API endpoints is added here. Now I'm going to click on it, and here I'm going to add a new endpoint. Now this new endpoint is going to make sure that the data is being fetched properly from any source I want. So I'm going to give this a name of, let's say, Game of Thrones. That's it. The actual URL has to go from here to here. Now this items path is basically, for example, if you have content that is being, like, let's say, for example, presented in, like, directly right now you see here is a URL, but before that you see some sort of stuff that says result or something like that. So what you would need to do is you need to put something like, let's say, /result, because your main content is getting started after the result, not directly. But here in this scenario we don't have such sort of stuff, so what we are going to do is we are going to just have a one slash, that's it. Now this API is a public API. That means, like, for example, anyone can access this, so there is no authorization required in the first place, so we don't need to work on authorization. And authorization is actually used whenever you are trying to get the API content which is some sort of logged, or you can application, so you enable authorization. That way no one else can access your API data, and that's it. Once you add your API URL, you have to do a sample request. You have to click on send request, and then you will get a success message. That success message is going to make sure that you see the content properly fine. Now you can see here that request successfully sent, the sample item is fetched, endpoint, and that's it. I'll click on save, and it is also connected. So that means that we are connected with the API URL getting the JSON content. I'll click on save. That's it. Now the next thing we are going to do is we are going to go to the query builder, And inside the query builder, we are going to create a new query that is going to make sure that the content we are trying to fetch is properly organized inside our JetEngine, and that way then create a grid out of it and we can present it in our website. So what we are going to do is add a new query. We're giving it a name of books. Yeah, that's it. And here in the query type, you can choose REST API query. So basically what we are going to do is we are going to fetch the query from a REST API. And from here, we have to select an endpoint. See? Now this is done, and you can see here, if you click on preview results, you can see your content. See, URL, name, ISBN, authors, and everything. So the content is working perfectly fine. It's all right here. So up until now, we are doing great. Everything is perfect. We'll click on, we'll disable this preview. And one thing I'm gonna tell you, this preview results is really useful whenever you're doing like further work on, let's say, filtering the stuff out, like based on names and stuff. Like it all depends on every different type of JSON content. So that's for the advanced stuff, or maybe I'll create another tutorial for it. But for the meantime, I'm just saying that this is useful. I'll click on add query. That's it, it's done. Now the first step was to add it as a JSON endpoint. The second step was to create a query out of it. Now since the content and its types of the content is being added, now the third step is to create a listing for it. So the first is that you go ahead and create a listing out of it. Now this listing is going to be this can be created directly inside Elementor, or you can create it inside JetEngine too. This is your own, I would say, this is in your own control. There is no restriction on that. Like for example, one way to do is you can add a new item. You can see here that I'm gonna have a new listing, and that is basically, this means a grid. So REST API endpoint, this endpoint should be this one. And then what I can do is I can create a name of it. Let's say I'll give it a name of books grid. I'll create listing item, and you can literally do the same by normally using Elementor, just leveraging dynamic content. Now here you have the control to create your grid listing the way you want. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have a normal container, and that container is going to have a sub container, I'd say. Yeah, and this sub container is going to have a background shadow. First it's going to have a background color, then there is going to be a shadow. I'll reduce the opacity. I'll give it a border ratio of 20. Then I'll add some paddings, like let's say 30. And now here I'm gonna do is this can be done any way you want. For example, if I'm going to, let's say if you've used Elementor's dynamic content, you add in here, and let's say you add any text here and you click on dynamic tags. Now by adding dynamic tags, what you do is you scroll down, and here in the JetEngine you can see REST API field. If you click on it, you see now the REST API endpoint is added here, Game of Thrones. From here I can choose, let's say for example, the name and everything right from here. So there are two ways, and the other way is basically relying on the JetEngine's, let's say, dynamic field. See, it's all here. So it's up to you. Whether, for me, I think what works for me the best is easily just relying on Elementor's dynamic content. Now here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be adding the name of the book. So this is the first thing I need to add. See, it's a Game of Thrones. I'll click on publish. Now this books grid is created. You can do the same inside Elementor without using JetEngine's listing grid, but it's up to your choice. This is what I do. Now we are going to go ahead and create a new page. Go ahead to the exit to WordPress, and now if you go to WordPress, you can see here we have a books grid. It's a listing grid, and the source is a REST API endpoint. So this content is actively fetched right here into the WordPress website without being stored. Now I'm going to add this into a page. So I'll give this a page name is books. Publish. I'll edit with Elementor. And inside Elementor, I'm going to choose the Elementor canvas, and I'll convert the page content, page style into white one. Yeah. Here I can add a title of books library. Now the next step is to use your JetEngine's listing grid widget. Now here, this is the widget you are going to use. You have to add this listing grid, and this listing grid is going to choose like the one you have created, and you're going to see all of that content right here. Now let's increase the width of our section or container, and here we can define how many columns we want, 4, 3, 2, the way we want. It's all up to you. And this is exactly how you can create a grid out of your JSON content into your WordPress website without adding that content. That's it for today. Have a great day. Take care. Bye bye.